My name's Josh. I'm 30 years old, and my drug of choice was opiates, specifically heroin. So my story began with one of religion versus relationship. So I grew up in the church. Mine was more of a do's and don'ts religion. My parents were strong Christians. They both worked at the church that I attended and went to a private middle school. But as I grew older, when push came to shove, my foundation wasn't built on a relationship with Christ. It was more or less based on the do's and don'ts of religion. So when that time came, when I entered high school, when I needed to know why I believed what I believed, my foundation was pretty much gone or sinking sand. So when push came to shove, my desires and my friends' desires, peer pressure won, and the religion fell by the wayside. So that was the basic intro of what led me to a path of addiction. So some of the things that I hated, growing up, I always perceived myself a certain way, and as I grew into my addiction, that was the one person that I knew I never wanted to become, but it became easier and more frequent for me to abuse the people I loved emotionally, mentally, physically, to get what I wanted to get. So that was some of the things that really struck home with me of, as I look back on it, it was the one thing that I never wanted to achieve, and it was what I achieved and then some. I think the most negative emotion would be thoughts of suicide. There were times in my life where I remember in my apartment trying to put on a facade for families or friends or coworkers, but behind closed doors it was the exact opposite of what I had been displaying. And I remember one evening just sitting in my bathroom looking in the mirror and looking at myself thinking, wow, this is what my life has come to. There was a lot of regret, a lot of depression, but that was all masked with a lie that I gave myself of, I don't have an issue because I can still hold a job, I can still have a car, I still have an apartment, a house. So that was something that allowed me to prolong my addiction further than what it should have been. But it was something that I really had to look in the mirror and ask myself, like, is this really what I wanted my life to be like? The work was, it was a tremendous amount of work. It was a lot of work, especially because I had the upbringing of, this is what we do, this is who we are, this is the image that we have, and I was able to maintain that for a number of years, but it was very challenging being able to, one, do what I wanted, when I wanted, and how I wanted, but then also portraying an image that was acceptable in society. So not realizing how much of a struggle that would be to maintain myself and my image with all the underlying factors with that. So it was a very, very big struggle. There were many times where I had contemplated, ending my life or doing something crazy that would not result well because of the cycle that I was living in. Probably one of the most unhappy, negative feelings and emotions that I've experienced were cravings and withdrawals. And when those things occurred, it was something that I myself, as a Christian man or someone who was raised in the church, all of my morals and all of my values kind of went right out the window because they didn't matter anymore. It was now what I wanted. It was, I didn't care who I had to hurt or manipulate. It was something that I was going to pursue, and I'll deal with the consequences later, because I was very aware of the consequences and the negative impact on my future that the decisions would be made, that I would make, but that didn't matter. So it was what I wanted, when I wanted it, and that was going to overtake everything until I got what I sought out to get. There were quite a few ways. I think one of the things that hit home with me was I ended up getting arrested twice in 1 week for the same charge: possession, paraphernalia, resisting arrest. And it was one thing that, as I'm sitting there in handcuffs looking back on, not understanding why my life took this path or why God had allowed certain things to happen in my life, And I remember sitting there thinking, like, what went wrong? What did I do? What happened? Like, where could I have fixed this? And it all kept boiling back to the religion versus relationship, that I didn't know why I did what I did. I just knew that that was wrong. You don't do this, and that's the end. The end is the end. Like, that's the bottom line. So, not understanding the heart aspect of it, I had a lot of mental knowledge, but not a lot of heart change. So as I look back on that and I think of where my life ended up, it was very difficult to come to that truth, because it was something that I've been believing a lie most of my life. So promise keeping was never one of my strong suits. Growing up, it was something that I was a very good athlete. I did well in school, and it was a no-brainer. I was a good, upstanding citizen, if you will. But when drugs and alcohol entered the scene, all of that kind of went out the window. It was very easy to make promises on the front end, but was pretty difficult to follow through with them. So I found myself a lot of times abusing and manipulating the people I love. One, save face, given the promises and speeches that I've made, but then on the back end, not really following through, or not following through intently. So that was one thing that I know as a young kid growing up, it was something that I never thought would be possible, but it was the exact person I came to be, was the exact person that I never thought would be, on the table. So the first step, I'll actually go back one step, because whenever I got arrested, I was coaching a soccer team in Ohio. I'm originally from Pennsylvania. So I'm in Ohio coaching a soccer tournament, and I'm in a hotel withdrawing because I'm out of state, out of my comfort zone. And I end up getting court papers to my house thinking, okay, now I got to appear to court. I'm going to be facing up to a year in prison, a couple felonies on the table. So my logic was, how can I make this go away as quickly as possible? So I Googled opiate help, got a 1-800 number, called it. I was booked on a flight to Florida in the next couple of days. So it wasn't until I received talks with a counselor at the rehab I went to, who happened to be a Christian. I had then explored the Christian route in the 90-day program, decided no, I've had a background in religion, I've been down that road, I know the Bible, I just want to do my time, get clean, make a look for the judge, and go home, and that's it. Well, there was a couple pieces of paperwork that got lost, which it was very ironic which pieces of paper got lost. It was which track I was going to do, which counselor I was going to have. So long story short, I ended up getting paired up with a Christian counselor who had a connection with Calvary House. So during this time, I was still pretty resistant of like, no, I don't want to get back into the Bible. I've been there, done that, but God had different plans for my life. So as I started to get a sober mind and start connecting with this counselor, she starts, re-sparking my interest in the Bible. And at that point, that's when God really did a transformation in my heart that was, I can't really even describe it, but it was so mind-blowing, because it was the exact opposite of the plan I had for my life when coming down to Florida. So long story short, after I get hooked up with this counselor, she then gives a call into Calvary House, which is a year-long discipleship program. So then I go into there and do a year, dig into the Word, learn how to be a Christian man, and really build that relationship with Christ. And I've never looked back since. A lot of things that worked for me was accountability. He put a lot of Christian men in my life that cared about me genuinely, and we would meet once a week, twice a week, and we would talk about the devotions that we were doing. We would talk about what God has been showing me in my life. He also provided support for my family, which my family, I had abused a lot of relationships, burned a lot of bridges, but my mother and my sister and my father were the closest advocates for me, and through that it was very beneficial with their support along with the accountability in my life. It was really cool to hear my parents call and ask me for advice for a change rather than me being a burden on them. And that was one of the turning points that I noticed, that God was really showing up in my life through my family. Because my family has been Christians for 30, 40 years, but I would say just like me, they were baby Christians. It was a religion until God allowed me to see what the harm of a religious mentality can do to a family rather than a relationship with Jesus. And through that was amazing. So restoring is a great topic for me. That was one thing that I never thought would be possible. Given the bright future that I had growing up, I was okay with throwing that away and allowing everything to be destroyed by the enemy, but God had different plans. So I look back now and I try and remind myself that the past isn't something to dwell on, but it is something to propel me forward in what God has for me. And it's amazing what God has already restored just by, I wouldn't say material things, but with the contentment and the peace, like what God has given me in my life is, I can't even put a price tag on that. It was something that I never would have thought possible, but now here I am married to my beautiful wife of almost 3 years. We're expecting our first son in February. These are things that I had marked off my list as never going to happen, given my lifestyle and what I was involved in. It was just something that I was okay with throwing down the drain, but that is one of the biggest things that God has restored for me, and I'm at a loss for words sometimes when I think about it. That means that everybody has a story, and that is one thing that nobody can take away from me or take away from you, that through Christ's blood, that the work is done. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to think about it. He's done it for us, because a lot of times I would try and Jesus plus or Jesus minus, but it's just Jesus plus nothing equals everything. And for myself, it's one of the things that I would encourage people that are scared to share their story, that is one thing that is so unique to every individual, and nobody can take away what happened to you, and no one can take away what God can do through that. Go to the Lord in prayer, and allow Him to do the work, because too many times in my life, I tried to do it on my own, and it never worked. But the second I decided to give up my reign in my life and allow God to take over, that's when all the change happened. And it wasn't easy, it wasn't quick. There are still days to this day. I've been clean now for almost 6 years, and I still struggle. I'm still human, I still sin, I still go to the Lord for forgiveness, but I know that it's not me that does the work, it's Him, and I have to rest in that, because that's where my hope comes from. It comes from Christ, not from Josh. The one thing I would say is that for anybody that is struggling, don't give up. That's the exact thing that the enemy wants to speak to us, is that we're not good enough. We've tried it, we've been there, we've done that, we've done the religious thing, we've done the church thing, but as God has revealed to me, that as long as we're still breathing and we're alive, He's not done with us. Jeremiah talks about He gives us a future and a hope, and that is very specific, especially to people in addiction, because we feel like we have no hope. So as long as you're alive and you're breathing, God's not done with you. My name is Josh. This is my story. Thank you for watching Overcomers TV.